Number 15. Galapagos Islands tortoises. The last thing you want on your Galapagos Islands is an unevolved tortoise.
Pond 5. Pond 5.
Charles Darwin, born in England on February 12, 1809, joined the crew of the HMS Beagle and sailed across the world making numerous observations and collecting evidence that led him to propose a hypothesis about the way that life changes over time. And I think the most important destination he went to was the Galapagos Islands. He noted that each of the islands had very different climates, even though they were located so close together. See, the lowest islands were hot, dry, and nearly barren, void of vegetation, whereas the higher islands had greater rainfall and an assortment of diverse vegetation. Now, Darwin was particularly fascinated by the land tortoises and marine iguanas that lived here. He learned that the tortoises' shells differed depending on which island they came from. He also noted that several small birds had differently shaped beaks. Darwin observed that the characteristics of many animals and plants varied noticeably among the different islands of the Galapagos. But you see, Darwin didn't use completely original ideas to create his theory of evolution. There were also several scientists that influenced him greatly. Two of these scientists that helped were James Hutton and Charles Lyell. Now, you see, they helped scientists recognize that Earth is many millions of years old, and the processes that changed Earth in the past are the same processes that operate in the present. You see, in 1975, Hutton proposed that layers of rock form very slowly, and that the same rocks are moved up by forces beneath the Earth's surface. Now, you see, I've got a very nice looking rock here.
That's 2 rocks.
Jerry, please! See, he suggested that these pushed-up rocks are what forms mountains and valleys, and that they're affected by natural factors like rain, heat, and cold temperatures. Because these processes would take millions of years, he realized that the Earth had to be much older than just a few thousand years, as many believed at the time. Now see, Lyell wrote the book Principles of Geology, which is not this book. You should not make assumptions. Darwin read... Now you see, Charles Darwin also read this book before his voyage on the Beagle. Lyell stressed that scientists must explain past events in terms that they can actually observe, since these processes are still going on. Lyell believed that if you're able to see these processes happening today, you would know for sure that it was these processes that formed the Earth. For example, volcanoes still release lava, and erosion continues to carve out canyons, just as they did in the past. After witnessing events like volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, Darwin realized that as the Earth changed, life would too. And since the Earth took millions of years to change, life must have as well. This is when he concluded that the Earth must be very, very old. Now, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck also contributed to Darwin's theory of evolution. You see, Lamarck proposed a mechanism by which the gradual change of species might take place, and explained that life started out simple and became complex over time. His theory is referred to as the theory of transformation, but it is also simply known as Lamarckism. And I see Lamarck's theory suggested that organisms change through the process known as use and disuse. I imagine you've been used a lot over the years.
Yes I have. Where are my hands?
Now, offspring would be changed depending on how the parents had used organs and appendages during their lifetime. For example, the long neck of giraffes could be attributed to the fact that giraffes more commonly ate from tall trees rather than bushes. So over time, giraffes' necks became longer, so it was easier for them to eat from the trees. While we know today that this is not actually the case because of hereditary genetics, Lamarck was right to believe that evolutionary change takes place gradually and over a long period of time. Now lastly, Thomas Malthus contributed to the theory of evolution with his publication of the Principle of Population. Oh, did you think I was reading the Principle of Population? No, I tricked you again. He made observations that the human race would be likely to overproduce if the population size was not kept under control. He produced the idea that the human population would increase geometrically, while the food supply and natural resources would increase arithmetically. That's Jerry's department. Do we have enough food? He concluded that, as more offspring were produced, there would be competition over the limited resources available. Now, these ideas helped Darwin formulate his theory of natural selection and survival in numbers, as well as make him realize that overpopulation was needed in order for there to be variability in populations. Okay, now it's time to reflect on what we've learned. Now, you see, we can make 8 main points to summarize Darwin's theory of evolution. Let's go. So, number 1, individual organisms in nature differ from one another. Some of this variation is inherited. Number 2, organisms in nature produce more offspring than can survive, and many of those that survive do not reproduce. Number 3, Jerry, no. Go back one.
Sorry.
Go back one.
Okay.
No, Jerry. Go back to 3. Okay, number 3. Because more organisms are produced than can survive, members of each species must compete for limited resources. Number 4. Because each organism is unique, each has different advantages and disadvantages in the struggle for existence. Number 5. Individuals best suited to their environment survive and reproduce most successfully. The characteristics that make them best suited to their environment are passed on to offspring. Now, individuals whose characteristics are not as well suited to their environment die. Now, number 6. Species change over time. Here's an example.
I've hatched. Over long periods, natural selection causes changes in the characteristics of a species, such as size and form. New species arise, other species disappear. Number 7, species alive today have descended with modifications from species that lived in the past. And finally, number 8, all organisms on Earth are united into a single tree of life by common descent.
Jerry, what are you doing in my clothes? No, don't look at me. Jerry! Jerry, what are you doing? Well, the next thing we need to talk about is the difference between artificial selection and natural selection. Natural selection and artificial selection, also known as selective breeding, can both cause changes in animals and plants. The difference is that natural selection occurs, as its name suggests, naturally. Artificial selection, on the other hand, only occurs when humans intervene. You see, artificial selection involves different animals being forced to breed together in order for the offspring to have desired traits of the parents. Now, this process is repeated continuously to ensure that the optimal offspring are produced. There are problems with this, though. For example, future generations of selectively bred plants and animals will share very similar genes, making some diseases more common. Also, there is an increased risk of genetic disease caused by recessive alleles. Memories. So, in conclusion, artificial selection makes organisms with traits that benefit humans, whereas natural selection makes organisms with traits that benefit them and better suit them to their environment. This is known as species fitness. Another way to think about it is their compatibility with their environment. Now, there's a lot of evidence to really actually support evolutionary theory, like fossils, for example. And then you have how different animals, they have really similar traits to other animals that we know existed, but are now extinct. For example, like how that whole thing with dinosaurs and birds. Yas! And also, don't forget about geographic distribution. Just read that. Oh, hey, look. That rock. Look at this. nice little dandelion in its natural habitat. So beautiful. Jerry, you need help!